The bouncer slipped a knife into my pocket during the pat-down and whispered, "Keep this hidden. You'll need it inside." His hands were trembling as he moved them back up my jacket, his eyes constantly peering back into the VIP section with this helpless desperation. I'd come to Eclipse for my roommate's birthday. Now I had a knife covered in a blood-stained napkin in my pocket, and a bouncer staring at me like I was the missing piece of his personal puzzle. "I think you made a mistake," I said quietly, reaching for my pocket. His hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. "Please, I gave it specifically to you and not the last guy for a reason. Keep this hidden, go inside, and whatever you do, stay away from VIP. Then leave before 2 a.m. My first instinct was that this was some kind of setup. Maybe he was planting drugs on me. This was how they blackmailed people or got them thrown out later. But his expression wasn't calculating or cruel. It was petrified, but hopeful. I was about to respond when suddenly behind me, I heard the click of heels on pavement. The bouncer's face instantly drained of color, and his teeth started shattering. I turned to see who'd arrived, thinking I'd face some intimidating mafia boss, but instead, I was greeted with a woman in a red dress and designer heels, maybe 40, with brown hair and gray roots. She smiled at the bouncer and walked right past the entire queue. "Axel," she didn't read his name tag. "Busy night?" "Yes, Ms. Monkowski." His voice was steady, but I could see sweat beading on his forehead. "Just patting people down, denying drunks, the usual." Ms. Monkowski turned to stare at me then. Something in her gaze made my skin crawl. It wasn't threatening exactly, but calculating, like she was measuring something. "Thorough as always. That's what I like about you, Axel." The bouncer's hand was still on my wrist, and I felt it trembling. He let go and stepped back. "You're free to go in," he said loudly, professionally. "Have a good night." Miss Monkowski had already moved past us, heading inside without showing ID. The bouncer looked at me with his desperate eyes one last time, like I was his final chance. The problem was, I'd never been good at reading intricate situations. I couldn't read people, couldn't look at body language and tell you if they were lying or being honest. It was always basically a coin flip, but the way Axel's voice was shaking, the way his whole body coiled with tension, made me walk through those doors with the knife in my pocket. The club was exactly what I expected. Thundering bass, strobing lights, packed bodies. I pushed through the crowd, pressing the knife tight against my body and ignoring my friends on the dance floor. I headed for the bathroom and locked myself in a stall where I pulled the knife out with shaking hands. I stared at the napkin covering it for what felt like hours. My phone was buzzing with friends asking if I got in, and the sound of people sniffing cocoa in the adjacent stall only made me more anxious. Eventually, I decided to open the napkin. Inside was not what I expected. A photograph of a blonde woman wearing sunglasses. A small key, brass and unmarked. A strand of brown hair without gray roots wrapped in clear tape. And written on the inside of the napkin itself, an address, 4421 Warehouse District, Unit 7. Below that, in different handwriting, "She's not dead." I stood there staring at these objects, trying to make sense of them. The photo could have been anyone. The hair could have been anyone. But a seeming stranger had risked their job, maybe more, to give these to me. I pulled out my phone and typed in the address. It came up as a storage facility on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that didn't ask questions. Someone wanted me for some reason to find something there. I shoved everything back in my pocket and worked up the courage to leave the stall. I saw my face in the mirror walking out, pale and scared. Back in the main club, I tried my best to blend in and look like everyone else, just dancing and having a good time. But then a middle-aged man in an expensive suit carrying drinks bumped into me. "Hey man, you all right?" he asked, wiping his Louis Vuitton, not even mad at me. "You look extremely off. Do you want me to get you some water?" I was about to apologize to him when I suddenly noticed something. I'd seen that exact Louis Vuitton suit earlier, specifically in the VIP section when I was first heading to the bathroom. No, I'm all good." I excused myself and started making my way out of the club. I wasn't taking any chances. I looked down at my watch and saw 1:45 a.m., but Axel wasn't at the door anymore. Now, a different bouncer stood there, looking half asleep. I walked to my car on shaking legs, half expecting someone to jump out to stop me, but nothing happened. At home, I spread the items on my kitchen table. The key, the photo, the hair, the address, evidence of something. But what? And why me? That's when M phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. She killed my sister. The hair is proof. The key opens Unit 7. The photo is her before she changed her face. Please help. M. I looked at the items again. If this was real, I was holding evidence of a murder. If it wasn't, I was being set up for something. I picked up my phone to call the police, then stopped. What would I even tell them? That a scared bouncer gave me a knife and some random person texted me claiming it was murder evidence? They'd probably think I was drunk or making it up, and if this was real, calling the cops might put Axel in danger or tip off Mrs. Munkowski before anyone could do anything useful. I set my phone down and stared at the items spread across my table. The knife looked clean now, but the napkin still had dark stains on it. The photo showed a woman who could be anyone. The key was just brass with no markings. The hair sample in tape looked like something from a crime show. I picked up each item and studied it, trying to find some detail I'd missed, but nothing new jumped out at me. My hands were shaking again. I gathered everything up and found an old shoebox in my closet, the kind that still had tissue paper stuffed inside from when I bought dress shoes last year. I put the knife in first, then the photo, the key, the hair sample, and the napkin with the address written on it. I shoved the box under my bed behind some storage bins where Flynn wouldn't accidentally find it. I tried to sleep, but kept seeing Miss Munkowski's calculating stare and Axel's desperate eyes. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined that VIP suit guy finding out I had the evidence and coming after me. I checked my phone about 50 times, half expecting another message from M or a threat from someone else. Nothing came. The hours crawled by with me lying there in the dark, listening to every small noise in the apartment and outside on the street. When my alarm finally went off at 6, I'd maybe slept 2 hours total and felt horrible. I got up and grabbed my phone, then retrieved the shoebox from under my bed. The morning light coming through my window made everything look less scary somehow, more manageable. I pulled out each item and laid them on my desk in a row. I opened my phone's camera and started taking pictures, making sure to get multiple angles of everything. The knife from the front, the back, the blade close up, the photo of the blonde woman from straight on, then tilted to reduce glare, the key from both sides, the hair sample still in its tape, the napkin with the address written on it, making sure the handwriting was clear. I took probably 50 photos total, way more than I needed, but I wanted to make sure I had everything documented. Then I went through my text messages and took screenshots of every message from M, including the one about the sister and the murder claim. I created a new folder in my Photos app and labeled it Eclipse Evidence, then moved all the pictures and screenshots into it. My hands were steadier now, doing something practical instead of just worrying. I opened my laptop and logged into 3 different cloud storage services I had accounts with. I uploaded the entire folder to Google Drive first, then to Dropbox, then to OneDrive. Each upload took a few minutes, and I watched the progress bars crawl across my screen, feeling slightly better with each completed backup. If something happened to my phone or someone took it from me, at least the evidence would still exist somewhere. I opened a new text message to M and typed carefully, thinking about each word. Need more proof before I do anything. No in-person meetings yet. Explain why you chose me. I read it over twice, deleted a few words, added them back, then finally hit send. The message showed as delivered immediately. I set my phone on my desk and went to make coffee, trying to act normal even though I was alone in the apartment. My phone buzzed before the coffee finished brewing. I grabbed it and saw M had already responded. The message was short, just 3 words that somehow made everything more real and more scary at the same time. You looked kind. I read it over and over, trying to figure out what that meant. Axel had been watching people in that crowd outside Eclipse, looking at faces, searching for someone who might help him. Out of everyone there, he'd picked me, because I looked kind. The idea that a stranger could see something in my face that made them trust me with evidence of a possible murder was both good and terrible. It meant Axel was really desperate and really scared, which made this whole situation feel more real. It also meant I had some kind of responsibility now, whether I wanted it or not. Flynn came out of his room around 7:30, still in his pajama pants and a wrinkled shirt. He walked into the kitchen and started making himself breakfast, grabbing eggs from the fridge and bread from the counter. I was sitting at the table with my coffee, trying to look normal and not like someone who'd barely slept and was hiding evidence under their bed. Flynn glanced at me while cracking eggs into a pan. You okay? You look rough. I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug and nodded. Yeah, just had too much to drink last night. Felt pretty sick. Flynn studied me for a second and I could tell he wasn't totally buying it, but he didn't push. That sucks. You should drink some water and maybe eat something. I agreed and got up to make toast, even though I wasn't hungry at all. The lie sat heavy in my stomach because Flynn and I had always been honest with each other about everything. We'd been roommates for 2 years and never really had secrets, but I couldn't drag him into this yet, not when I didn't even know what this was or how dangerous it might be. Flynn finished making his eggs and sat down across from me, scrolling through his phone while he ate. The normal morning routine felt strange when I had a knife and murder evidence hidden 20 feet away. After Flynn left for class, I opened my laptop again and pulled up the address from the napkin. I typed 4421 Warehouse District Unit 7 into Google and found the storage facility's website. The place was called Secure Space Storage and looked pretty basic from the photos. I clicked through their information pages and learned they were open from 6 in the morning until 10 at night, with keycard access for customers who rented units. The reviews section had mostly positive comments about the place being older, but well-maintained. People used it for storing business inventory, seasonal stuff, and extra furniture. One review from 8 months ago complained that the cameras were too invasive and made them uncomfortable, which actually made me feel a little better about going there. If there were lots of cameras, that meant there would be footage of whoever had been accessing Unit 7, and maybe that could help figure out what was going on. I scrolled through more reviews and learned that the facility had cameras covering the main gate, the office, and all the hallway areas. The manager was apparently friendly, but strict about rules. I wrote down the address properly and pulled it up on Google Maps to see where it was located. The storage facility sat on the outskirts of town in an industrial area, about 20 minutes from my apartment if traffic was okay. Around 11, I got in my car and drove toward the warehouse district, telling myself I was just going to look at the place from outside. The area got more industrial as I drove, with fewer houses and more warehouses and small manufacturing buildings. I found secure space storage easily enough, a large facility with several long buildings painted tan and brown. I drove past the entrance slowly, noting the camera mounted on a pole pointing at the main gate. I circled the block and came back around from the other direction, this time getting a better look at the parking lot and office. There was another camera covering the office entrance, and I could see what looked like more cameras mounted on the corners of each storage building. The parking lot had about a dozen cars in it, and I watched people loading boxes into trucks and wheeling carts back and forth between units. The place was busy for a weekday morning, which good. If I went inside, I'd blend in with all the other customers instead of standing out. I circled the block one more time, memorizing the layout and where the cameras were positioned, then drove back home. My phone buzzed while I was parking. Em had sent another message with a photo attached. I opened it and saw the blonde woman from the first photo, but this time she wasn't wearing sunglasses, and her face was completely visible. She was standing outside Eclipse, laughing at something, with part of another person cropped out of the frame. The photo looked older, less polished than modern phone cameras usually produced. I checked the image details and saw the timestamp read 3 years ago, dated in early spring. Em's message below the photo said, "Before she changed everything, before Monkowski got to her." I zoomed in on the woman's face, studying her features. She looked happy in this photo, genuinely happy, not like someone in danger. But 3 years was a long time. A lot could change in 3 years. I saved the photo to my Eclipse evidence folder and backed it up to the cloud services. The woman's face was now burned into my memory. If I saw her in person, I'd recognize her, assuming she still looked anything like this photo. But Em claimed Ms. Monkowski had changed her face, which meant facial recognition might not even work. I spent the next hour trying to decide what to do. Going to the storage unit felt risky, but sitting around doing nothing felt worse. If I went during afternoon hours when the place was busy, I'd look like any other customer checking on their stuff. Going at night would be suspicious, and the facility might have reduced access after dark anyway. I made myself eat lunch, forcing down a sandwich I didn't taste, then changed into normal clothes that wouldn't stand out. Jeans, a plain shirt, regular shoes, nothing that would make me memorable to anyone watching cameras. I grabbed my keys and phone, made sure the shoebox was still hidden under my bed, and headed back to my car. The drive to secure space storage felt longer this time, every traffic light making me more nervous. I kept checking my mirrors to see if anyone was following me, but the cars behind me changed constantly, and no one seemed interested in where I was going. The storage facility parking lot was still busy when I arrived around 2 in the afternoon. I parked near the office and walked inside, trying to look casual and confident like I belonged there. The office was small with a counter, some chairs and walls covered with information about unit sizes and rental rates. A woman in her 30s sat behind the counter, typing on a computer. She looked up when I walked in and smiled. "Hi there, can I help you?" I walked up to the counter and gave her what I hoped was a normal smile back. "Yeah, I'm thinking about renting a unit for some college stuff. Just wanted to check out the place and see what you have available." The woman, whose name tag said Carly Sanford, pulled out a brochure and spread it on the counter. "Sure, we've got several sizes available. What are you looking to the store?" I made up something about textbooks and seasonal clothes, and Carly explained the different unit sizes and monthly rates. She was friendly and professional, not suspicious at all about why I was there. I asked about the security system, trying to sound like a concerned customer. Carly assured me they had cameras throughout the facility that recorded everyone who entered units. "We take security seriously here. The hallway cameras catch everyone coming and going. We only check the footage if there's a problem, though. Privacy is important to our customers." The information made me both relieved and nervous. If I went to Unit 7, I'd definitely be on camera, but at least that meant other people accessing it would be recorded too. I thanked Carly for the information and told her I'd think about it, then walked out of the office like I was heading back to my car. Instead, I turned toward the nearest storage building and walked inside, following the signs for unit numbers. The hallway was long and fluorescent lit, with orange metal doors on both sides marked with numbers. I walked slowly, checking the numbers as I passed. Unit 7 was about halfway down the first hallway, on the right side. My heart was pounding, so hard I could hear it in my ears. That same feeling I'd had in Eclipse's bathroom, but worse somehow. I reached Unit 7 and pulled the key from my pocket. My hands were shaking as I slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. I turned it and heard a quiet click as the lock disengaged. I grabbed the door handle and lifted, rolling the door up just enough to duck inside. The space was small, maybe 5 by 10 feet, with a single overhead bulb that came on automatically when I entered. The unit was mostly empty except for a few items against the back wall. A metal document case with a combination lock sat in the center, the kind you'd use for important papers. Several blank envelopes were stacked next to it, the kind you could buy at any office supply store. A cheap burner phone still in its plastic packaging sat beside the envelopes, and next to everything was a ledger, the old-fashioned kind with a hard cover and pages for handwritten entries. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of everything, my hands still shaking but my mind focused on documenting what I was seeing. The document case sitting in the center has a combination lock that I can't open without the code, but the ledger next to it is just sitting there waiting for me. I pick it up and start flipping through pages filled with columns of dates, initials, and dollar amounts going back 2 years. Some entries have locations written next to them in different handwriting, places like Eclipse 5 IP and Riverside Suite. The amounts range from a few hundred to several $1,000s, all organized by month. I'm taking pictures of every page, trying to capture the details clearly, when my eyes drift up to the hallway outside. The security camera mounted on the wall is angled perfectly to see directly into my unit. Every single move I've made since opening this door has been recorded. My hands start shaking so bad I almost drop my phone. The reality hits me like a truck. If Monkowski has any connection to this storage facility, if she checks these cameras regularly, or gets alerts when someone accesses certain units, she could already know that someone is in here right now. She could be watching me photograph her evidence this very second. I force myself to breathe slowly through my nose and think clearly about what I should take versus what I should leave behind. Taking everything would be obvious theft, but taking nothing means I have no backup if something happens to the photos. My brain is racing through options when I hear a car door slam outside. The sound echoes through the metal building, and my heart rate shoots through the roof. Heavy footsteps approach the building entrance, getting louder as they come down the hallway. I quickly grab the burner phone still in its plastic packaging and stuff one of the blank envelopes into my jacket pocket. My fingers fumble with my phone as I take final photos of the ledger's most recent pages, the ones from the last 3 months. The footsteps are getting closer, maybe 20 feet away now, and I'm trying to stay quiet while my whole body is screaming at me to run. The footsteps pass right by my unit and continue down the hall toward the far end. I hear another unit door roll up somewhere past me. The scare makes my decision for me. I've got enough photos and a couple of items. Time to get out of here before whoever that is comes back. I close the ledger carefully and put everything back exactly how I found it, except for the phone and envelope I took. My hands are still shaking as I pull the unit door down and lock it with the brass key. I walk as calmly as I can manage back to the office where the manager is sitting at her desk doing paperwork. She looks up and smiles when I come in. I tell her I'd like to rent a unit after all, that I've decided it would be useful for storing some stuff. She seems happy to have the business and pulls out paperwork for a unit 2 buildings over from Unit 7. I pay cash for 1 month, giving her my real name and contact info because I need to establish a legitimate reason for being here on camera. If anyone reviews the footage, they'll see me touring the facility, renting a unit, totally normal customer behavior. As I'm leaving and walking back to my car, I notice a black SUV parked near the exit that definitely wasn't there when I arrived. The windows are tinted too dark to see inside, and it's positioned where it has a clear view of everyone coming and going. I don't look directly at it, just get in my car and drive away at a normal speed. Back home, I spread everything I took out on my bed and examine each item carefully. The burner phone is still sealed in its plastic packaging, brand new and unused. The envelope is completely empty inside, but when I hold it up to my nose, there's a faint smell of perfume, something floral and expensive. My photos of the ledger show dozens and dozens of entries with initials I don't recognize. Some appear multiple times across different months, others just once or twice. I scroll through looking for patterns, but I'm not trained for this kind of analysis. I need to know what I'm actually looking at here. I send several of the clearest ledger photos to M's number, along with a message asking what this all means. The response comes back within an hour, much longer than M's previous short texts. The message explains that those initials match names from missing person forums and online groups dedicated to finding people who vanished. Some are aliases that people used online or fake names they gave at clubs. The dates next to the initials match up with when those people disappeared from clubs and bars around the city. M says Monkowski vets clients who want access to the VIP section, and some people who go in never come out the same as they went in. Reading those words makes my skin crawl, because this is clearly way bigger than just one missing sister. This is a whole network of people, a system that's been running for years. M sends another message asking if we can do a voice call, because typing everything out is taking too long. I'm nervous about talking directly, but I agree, as long as M uses a voice changer app. The call connects a few minutes later, and M's voice comes through sounding robotic and distorted. It's brief, because M is clearly scared of being traced, but the explanation is chilling. M says Monkowski runs a network that identifies vulnerable people at clubs and bars, people who are desperate or scared or running from something. Then she connects them with wealthy clients who pay a lot of money for what M calls discretion services. M believes their sister was forced into this network and given a new identity to hide her from her old life. Whether that was to protect her or control her, M isn't sure, but either way, she's been trapped in this system for years now. That evening, I returned to Eclipse around 9 at night, hoping to catch Axel and ask him more questions about what he knows. But when I get to the entrance, there's a different bouncer working the door, someone I've never seen before. I wait in line, and when I get to the front, I casually ask if Axel is working later tonight. The bouncer and the door person checking IDs exchange a quick glance that tells me everything. They say Axel has been reassigned to a different venue across town, that he's not working at Eclipse anymore. The way they say it, flat and final, makes it totally clear that I shouldn't ask any more questions about where he went or why. When I get home, Flynn is waiting for me in the living room instead of being in his room like usual. He says I've been acting paranoid and secretive for days now, that I'm barely sleeping and constantly looking over my shoulder. He asks me directly if I'm in some kind of trouble, if there's something I need to tell him. I deflect badly, mumbling something about just being stressed with school and work. He doesn't believe me at all. I can see it in his face that he knows I'm lying, but he doesn't push the issue further. What hurts is seeing the look in his eyes, the hurt that I'm shutting him out when we've always been honest with each other about everything. The next morning, I get to work early and find my coworker who's really good with computers and online research. I ask him if he can run some basic public searches on Eclipse's ownership structure and business licenses, just out of curiosity. He's happy to help and spends about 20 minutes digging through public records and business filings. What he finds is interesting. Eclipse is owned by a shell company that's registered in Delaware, which is apparently common for businesses that want privacy. But buried in one filing from 2 years ago, there's a document listing Monkowski as operations director. The whole ownership structure is deliberately complicated, clearly designed to hide who actually controls and profits from the club. I stare at my phone screen, finger hovering over the police department's number, but something stops me. Walking into a station with stolen evidence feels like a terrible idea. They could arrest me for breaking into the storage unit, or worse, someone connected to Monkowski might work there and tip her off. I close the phone app and open my email instead, creating a new anonymous account using a fake name and no personal information. I attach one photo of the ledger showing the clearest entries with dates and initials, then type the storage facility address into the message body. My hands shake as I write a vague explanation about finding suspicious documents without mentioning how I got them or who I am. I hit send before I can change my mind, then delete the email account completely and clear my browser history 3 times. The next 2 days drag by in this weird state of constant anxiety, where I jump every time my phone buzzes. Flynn asks if I'm feeling okay because I've barely eaten, and I keep staring out our apartment windows like I'm expecting someone. I tell him I'm just stressed about midterms, which is a lie he clearly doesn't believe based on the way he looks at me. On the 3rd day, my phone rings from an unknown local number, and my stomach drops. I almost don't answer, but curiosity wins and I pick up. The voice on the other end is calm and professional, introducing himself as Detective Calloway from the city police department. He says he received information about a storage unit and would like to discuss what I know about it. I ask him how he got my number since I sent an anonymous tip, and there's a pause before he explains that the storage facility manager provided my information after police inquired about recent access to Unit 7. He emphasizes that I'm not in trouble if I cooperate fully, that he just wants to understand what I found and why I contacted police. We agree to meet at a coffee shop near campus in 2 hours, somewhere public where I'll feel safe. I spend those 2 hours making copies of everything I have, the ledger photos, the texts from M, screenshots of my research on Eclipse's ownership. I hide the originals under my mattress and bring only the copies with me, just in case something goes wrong. The coffee shop is busy with students studying, which makes me feel slightly better about meeting a detective I've never seen before. Detective Calloway is easy to spot, a middle-aged guy in a button-down shirt sitting alone at a corner table. He shows me his badge immediately and offers to buy me coffee, which I decline because my stomach is too twisted to handle caffeine right now. He pulls out a notebook and starts by explaining chain of custody rules for evidence, how anything I give him needs to be documented properly to be useful in court. I show him my copies, and he studies them carefully, asking detailed questions about how I obtained them and what I know about their contents. His approach is patient and professional, treating me like a witness rather than a suspect, which helps me relax enough to tell him most of the story. I leave out M's identity and some details about Axel, but I explain finding the storage unit and what was inside. Detective Calloway looks up from the ledger photos with this serious expression that makes my chest tight. He tells me that one of the alias initials matches a cold case from 2 years ago, a woman who disappeared after being seen at Eclipse. The case went cold because there were no witnesses and no physical evidence, but this ledger might be the break they needed to reopen it. He asks if I'm willing to provide a formal statement later, and I agree, though the reality of being involved in an actual police investigation is starting to sink in. That night I can't sleep, lying in bed staring at my ceiling and replaying the meeting with Detective Calloway over and over. Around 11 I get up to get water and glance out my window, then freeze completely. Across the street, standing under a streetlight, is the VIP suit man from Eclipse. He's just standing there looking at my building, not moving or approaching, just watching. I recognize him instantly from that night, the expensive suit, the way he carries himself. I back away from the window and grab my phone, texting Detective Calloway about what I'm seeing. My hands are shaking, so badly I have to retype the message twice. I wait by the window, peeking through the curtain every few minutes, but 20 minutes later when I look again, he's gone. Detective Calloway calls me back within 30 minutes, asking if I'm safe and if I want an officer to drive by. I tell him I'm okay now, that the guy left, but the fear doesn't go away even after we hang up. I drag my desk chair over and wedge it under my doorknob, then check every window lock in the apartment twice. Sleep doesn't come at all that night. The next morning I'm exhausted but wired, and I make a plan for practical security steps I can take. I change my route to campus, taking different streets and varying my schedule so I'm not predictable. I stop at a hardware store and buy a rubber door wedge and a cheap security camera that connects to my phone. The camera gets installed above my apartment door that same afternoon, angled so I can see anyone approaching. Flynn notices everything, the new camera, my paranoid behavior, the way I keep checking my phone, but he doesn't comment directly. His concerned looks are getting harder to ignore, though, and I know I'm going to have to tell him something soon. My phone buzzes the next morning with a new message from M, and I open it to find a photo of a hospital wristband. The name on it reads, Alicia Bedford, and the date is from 18 months ago. M's message says, this is when they changed her face, that Munkowski paid for the surgery to hide her. I pull up the ledger photos on my laptop and cross-reference the date, finding entries marked AR, with procedure complete written next to them. The timeline matches perfectly. I spend the next several hours going through every ledger entry, comparing dates and initials with the information M has provided. A pattern emerges that's impossible to ignore. Several payments went to a medical clinic downtown around the same time as the wristband date. The payments are routed through the same shell companies that own Eclipse, the same complicated structure my coworker found. It's too consistent to be random, too deliberate to be innocent. I'm starting to believe this is all real, that Munkowski really did help Alicia disappear and change her identity. The question is whether it was to save her or control her. I look up the medical clinic's address and decide I need to see it for myself. The clinic is in a nice part of downtown, the kind of place that does expensive cosmetic procedures for wealthy clients. I walk in pretending to be interested in getting work done, picking up brochures and intake forms from the waiting room. The receptionist is friendly and professional, giving me a price list without asking too many questions about what I want done. The walls are covered with before and after photos showing dramatic facial changes, people who look completely different after surgery. I wonder how many of these patients came here voluntarily and how many were sent by someone like Munkowski. I take a few brochures and leave, feeling like I'm getting closer to understanding the full picture. When I get home that evening, something feels wrong the moment I unlock my apartment door. The lock turns normally and everything looks secure, but inside I notice small things that are off. My laptop is at a slightly different angle on my desk than I left it. My desk drawer isn't fully closed even though I always push it shut. There's a faint smell of cologne in the air, something expensive that I don't recognize. Someone has been in here searching for something, and they were careful, but not perfect about covering their tracks. I check my hidden evidence immediately, pulling up my mattress to find everything still there. My security camera footage shows nothing unusual at the door, which means whoever came in either picked my lock or had a key. I grabbed my phone and called the number on the card Detective Calloway had given me when we first met. He picked up on the second ring, and I told him someone had been in my apartment, that things were moved around, and there was a smell I didn't recognize. He asked if I was safe right now, and I said yes. Then he told me to stay put and not touch anything else. He arrived 20 minutes later with another officer, a younger guy who immediately started taking photos of my apartment, while Detective Calloway sat down with me at my kitchen table. The detective pulled out a notebook and asked me to walk him through exactly what I noticed when I came home, writing down every detail I could remember about the door lock, the laptop angle, the drawer, the cologne smell. He was calm and methodical, treating this like it mattered, even though nothing was actually taken. The other officer dusted my doorknob and window latches for prints, then checked my fire escape access. Detective Calloway closed his notebook and looked at me seriously, his expression more concerned than before. He told me to make a list of anything that might be missing, even small things, and to check if any documents or files on my computer had been accessed. Then he leaned forward, and his voice got quieter, more intense. He said people who run operations like Monkowski's don't hesitate to intimidate witnesses, that breaking in without taking anything is a classic scare tactic designed to show they can reach me whenever they want. He warned me seriously against taking any vigilante actions, said I needed to let the police handle everything from here because these people were dangerous and connected. I nodded, but my hands were shaking as I gripped my coffee mug. After they left, I checked my laptop's recent files and browser history, finding nothing obviously tampered with, but the violation of my space made my skin crawl. My phone buzzed around 10 that night with a text from a number I didn't recognize. The message was short and desperate, just a few words that made my stomach drop. Coffee tomorrow 9 a.m., Riverside Park, South Bench. Please. The signature was just one letter, M, but I knew immediately it was Axel. I stared at the message for a long time, reading the fear between the words. I forwarded it to Detective Calloway, and he called me back within 5 minutes. He asked if I felt comfortable meeting Axel, and I said yes, that I thought Axel genuinely wanted to help. Detective Calloway told me to only meet in a very public place, which the park was, and to record the entire conversation if possible. He said he couldn't send officers to watch because that might scare Axel off, but he wanted me to text him before and after the meeting. I agreed, and spent the rest of the night barely sleeping, running through possible scenarios in my head. What if Monkowski found out Axel was meeting me? What if this was some kind of trap? Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. But something about that single word, please, made me believe Axel was reaching out because he had no other options left. Riverside Park the next morning was busy with joggers and people walking dogs, which made me feel slightly safer. I got there 15 minutes early and sat on the south bench, watching everyone who passed by. Axel showed up exactly at 9, looking completely different from the confident bouncer I'd seen at Eclipse. His eyes were red and sunken like he hadn't slept in days, his clothes wrinkled, his hands shaking as he sat down next to me. He didn't even say hello, just started talking immediately in a low, rushed voice. He told me Miss Monkowski controls everything at Eclipse through fear and money, that she decides who gets into VIP, who gets special services, and who gets hurt if they talk. His words came out fast and desperate, like he'd been holding them in for too long. He said she has dirt on everyone who works for her, photos and recordings and financial information that she uses to keep people in line. Axel explained that the VIP section isn't just for wealthy clients, it's where Monkowski vets people for her network, where she identifies who needs what and connects them with the right services for a price. He kept glancing around the park while he talked, his leg bouncing nervously. He said he's been trying to get out for months, but every time he considers quitting, Monkowski reminds him of what she knows about his past, about mistakes he made that could ruin his life if they got out. I listened without interrupting, letting him get everything out. Axel's voice cracked as he told me about the envelopes. He said he delivered packages like the one he gave me a few times over the past year, never knowing exactly what was inside, but understanding they were part of Monkowski's system. He was crying now, tears running down his face as he talked about needing the money for his mom's medical bills, about how he didn't realize how deep it all went until it was too late. He said he thought he was just working security at a nightclub, that the VIP stuff seemed shady, but he told himself it wasn't his business. But then he started noticing patterns. People going into VIP who looked scared instead of excited, clients who seemed more like predators than party guests. He saw Monkowski guide certain women through the back entrance, watched her have quiet conversations with men in expensive suits who handed over thick envelopes. Axel said he wanted to help bring her down, but he was petrified of what she'd do to him if she found out he talked. His hands were shaking, so badly he had to clasp them together to keep them still. He told me his mom depends on him for everything, that if something happened to him, she'd have nobody. I could see the genuine terror in his eyes, the weight of being trapped in a situation he never meant to be part of. I pulled out my phone slowly and asked Axel if I could record what he was telling me. He looked at the phone for a long moment, then nodded and said yes immediately. He said he wanted this on record in case something happened to him, that he needed someone to know the truth. I hit record and placed the phone on the bench between us, then asked him to start from the beginning and tell me everything he knew about Monkowski's operation. We spent 20 minutes with my phone recording as Axel detailed the structure of everything. He named other employees who were involved, bouncers and bartenders and managers who all played specific roles in the network. He described VIP clients he'd seen multiple times, gave physical descriptions and details about their behavior. He explained how Monkowski used the club as a front, how she screened potential clients through regular VIP access before offering them more exclusive services. Axel said there were ledgers and records kept somewhere, that Monkowski was too smart to run everything on trust alone. He told me about offshore accounts and shell companies, about lawyers who handled the paperwork to keep everything looking legal on the surface. When he finally stopped talking, his face looked lighter somehow, like confessing had lifted part of the weight. I promised to keep him anonymous with the police, to help him find a way out safely. He thanked me and left quickly, disappearing into the morning crowd before anyone could notice how long we'd been sitting together. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from M that immediately set me on edge. The message was angry and accusing, saying the police were moving too slowly and demanding I do more to find Alicia. M wrote that every day that passed was another day their sister spent trapped in Monkowski's network, that I had evidence and connections now and needed to push harder. I stared at the message feeling frustrated and defensive. I was already risking everything, had my apartment broken into, was meeting terrified witnesses in parks, and recording secret conversations. M's impatience made me question whether they understood the actual danger involved, whether they realized that pushing too hard could get people hurt or killed. I typed back a careful response explaining that the police needed to build a solid case, that rushing in without proper evidence could blow everything and let Monkowski walk free. I told M that pushing too hard could get people hurt, including their sister if she was really alive somewhere. M responded immediately with more angry messages, but I put my phone on silent and tried to breathe slowly. I understood their desperation to find Alicia, but I couldn't let their emotions drive me into making reckless decisions that might destroy the whole investigation. I met Detective Calloway again that evening at a different coffee shop across town. I handed over the burner phone still sealed in its package, plus a USB drive containing high-resolution scans of all the ledger pages I'd photographed at the storage unit. He took the items carefully, placing them in evidence bags and labeling everything. He thanked me for the recording of Axel's statement, said it was exactly the kind of first-hand testimony they needed to corroborate the physical evidence. But then his expression got serious, and he warned me that building a prosecutable case takes time and solid evidence. He explained that he couldn't just arrest Missy Monkowski based on a ledger and witness statements without corroborating everything first. Prosecutors need to prove every element beyond reasonable doubt, need to connect the physical evidence to specific crimes and specific people. He said rushing the arrest could mean Monkowski walks on a technicality, that they needed to be patient and thorough. I asked how long it would take, and he said weeks minimum, possibly months, depending on what the forensic accountants found in the ledger. The timeline frustrated me, but I understood the logic. Detective Calloway ordered us both coffee, and we sat there for another hour while he explained the legal process, walking me through what would happen next and what role I might play as a witness. Detective Calloway leaned across the table, and his voice dropped even lower. He warned me seriously about information leaks, saying that operations like Monkowski's often have connections inside various institutions. Police departments, city offices, even courts sometimes have people on payrolls or under pressure. He said I needed to limit who I talked to about this case, to vary my phone usage in case someone was monitoring my calls, and to be extremely careful about what I said, even to people I trusted. The warning made my paranoia spike immediately. I asked if he thought the police department itself was compromised, and he said probably not, but he couldn't rule anything out completely. He told me to assume that anything I said or did might get back to Monkowski somehow, to operate like I was always being watched. The conversation left me feeling more isolated than before, like I couldn't trust anyone or anything. Detective Calloway must have seen my expression, because he put his hand on my shoulder and told me I was doing the right thing, that cooperating with law enforcement was the safest path, even if it felt slow and frustrating. But as I walked back to my car, I found myself looking over my shoulder constantly, wondering if someone was following me or watching from a distance. That night, I finally told Flynn everything because I couldn't keep lying to him anymore, and because he deserved to know why there might be danger coming to our apartment. I waited until after dinner when we were both sitting on the couch. Then I just started talking and didn't stop until I'd explained the whole situation from the beginning. The knife at Eclipse, the storage unit, the ledger, the break-in, meeting Axel, all of it. Flynn's face went through about 10 different expressions while I talked, shock and confusion and anger and fear all mixing together. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, just staring at me. Then he exploded, asking why I didn't tell him sooner, why I let him walk around clueless while dangerous people were watching our apartment. I tried to explain that I was trying to protect him, but he cut me off, saying that was bullshit, that keeping him in the dark just made things worse. But underneath his anger, I could see real fear for both of us, fear about what might happen next. He asked what the hell we were supposed to do now, and I told him honestly that I didn't know, that I was cooperating with the police and hoping that would be enough. Flynn ran his hands through his hair and said, if I was really in this deep, we needed to stick together and watch each other's backs. He made me promise not to hide anything else from him, to tell him immediately if anything else happened. I agreed, and we sat there in heavy silence, both of us processing what this meant for our lives. Flynn got up and started pacing around our living room, his mind clearly working through options and scenarios. He stopped suddenly and turned to face me with his arms crossed. He demanded we make a concrete plan right now, said we had 2 choices and needed to pick one immediately. Either I fully cooperate with police and trust them to handle everything, or we both pack up and leave town until this whole thing blows over. He said he wasn't willing to sit around our apartment waiting for something bad to happen, wasn't going to just hope that Munkowski decided to leave us alone. His ultimatum was clear and non-negotiable. I could see it in his stance and his expression. I thought about running, about how easy it would be to just disappear for a few months and let the police do their work without me. But then I thought about Axel's terrified face in the park, about M's desperate messages, about all the names in that ledger who deserved justice. I told Flynn I was going all in with the police because running wouldn't solve anything. It would just delay the problem and maybe let Munkowski hurt more people in the meantime. Flynn studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly and said, okay, if that's what we're doing, then we're doing it together. But from now on, we're honest about everything, and we watch each other's backs constantly. We shook hands like we were sealing some kind of pact, and despite everything, I felt slightly better, knowing I wasn't facing this alone anymore. The next morning, I called my boss Stefan from my bedroom while Flynn was in the shower. My hands shook as I dialed, and I had to force my voice to sound normal when he picked up. I explained vaguely that I was dealing with a safety issue and needed to take a week off work, trying not to give too many details that might raise questions. Stefan was surprisingly understanding and told me to take whatever time I needed, not asking for specifics about what was happening. The relief of having one less thing to worry about was huge, even though I knew I was losing income I desperately needed for rent and bills. I thanked him and hung up, then sat there staring at my phone and wondering how much longer this would drag on. Flynn knocked on my door and asked if everything was okay with work, and I told him it was handled, that Stefan gave me the time off without problems. 2 hours later, my phone rang with Detective Calloway's number, and my stomach dropped before I even answered. He told me to sit down because he had major news, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. Police had executed a search warrant on Unit 7 early that morning and found a hidden compartment built into the floor that I'd completely missed when I was there. Inside were additional documents, photos, and several USB drives containing files that went back years. The evidence included detailed client lists with real names and contact information, payment records showing money transfers and communications that directly showed Miss Munkowski's involvement in coercion and extortion. Detective Calloway said prosecutors were finally getting interested because this was building into something they could actually take to court. I asked what would happen next, and he explained they were analyzing the USB drives and cross-referencing names, that it would take time, but they were making real progress. I felt this weird mix of relief and terror because progress meant we were getting closer to justice, but also closer to Munkowski, finding out how much evidence we had. 2 days passed with nothing happening, and I started to relax slightly, thinking maybe the worst was over. Then I checked my mailbox and found a plain white envelope with no return address and my name handwritten on the front. My hands started shaking as I opened it right there in the lobby. Inside was a single piece of paper with a printed message in plain black text that said, "Mind your own business or you'll regret it." There was nothing else, no signature or additional threats, but the meaning was absolutely clear. Someone knew I was cooperating with police and wanted me to stop. I took the envelope and paper straight back to my apartment and photographed everything with my phone, making sure to capture the postmark and the way my name was written. I sent the photos to Detective Calloway immediately, with a message explaining when I found it. He called me back within 10 minutes and told me to put the envelope in a plastic bag and not touch it anymore, because they might be able to get prints or DNA from it. That night, M sent me a text with a video file attached and a message saying I needed to watch it immediately. I downloaded the clip and hit play, my heart pounding as the shaky footage showed the inside of Eclipse's VIP section. The blonde woman from the photo was walking through the space with Miss Monkowski's hand on her shoulder, guiding her toward a back area. The woman looked different from the photo I had. Her face was changed somehow, and her hair was darker, but M insisted in their message that it was definitely Alicia. The timestamp on the video showed it was recorded 6 months ago, meaning she'd been alive and in Monkowski's orbit this whole time. I watched the clip 5 times trying to see what M saw, trying to understand if this woman really was their missing sister, or if M was seeing what they wanted to see. The next day, M and I finally agreed to meet in person at a busy downtown coffee shop during lunch rush. I got there early and sat near the back where I could see the door, my leg bouncing nervously under the table. M walked in looking younger than I expected, maybe early 20s, with dark circles under their eyes and this nervous energy that made them constantly look around. They sat down across from me and immediately pulled out their phone to show me more photos of their sister from before she disappeared. The family resemblance was clear in the shape of the eyes and the way they smiled, and I started to believe M was telling the truth. M was credible, but also desperate, pushing me to move faster than the police were comfortable with and asking why we couldn't just go to Eclipse and confront Alicia directly. I tried to explain that approaching her could put her in danger or cause her to run, that we needed to let the investigation work properly. M got frustrated and said their sister had been missing for over a year and they were tired of waiting for bureaucracy to catch up. They leaned forward and started explaining in a rushed whisper that Alicia had been in a really bad relationship before she disappeared, that her boyfriend was controlling and sometimes violent. Alicia had desperately wanted to escape, but she had no money saved and nowhere safe to go, no family nearby who could help. M believed that Monkowski had somehow found Alicia when she was most vulnerable and promised her protection and a completely new identity in exchange for working in the VIP network. What started as an escape from one bad situation became a different kind of trap, and now Alicia was too scared or too controlled to leave Monkowski's operation. I asked M how they knew all this, and they admitted it was mostly guesswork based on patterns they'd researched, but the timeline matched perfectly with when Alicia stopped contacting them. That afternoon, Detective Calloway contacted me with concerning news that made my paranoia spike even higher. He said he thought there might be a leak somewhere in the investigation because information was getting out faster than it should, that details only a few people knew were somehow reaching the wrong ears. He asked me to centralize all my contact through him only, not to talk to other officers or investigators, and to be extra careful about what I said on the phone or in texts. The paranoia was getting completely exhausting, and I was starting to question everyone around me, wondering who might be feeding information to Monkowski. I came home that evening tired and stressed, just wanting to collapse on my couch and not think about any of this for a few hours. But when I walked up to my apartment door, I froze because sitting on my doormat was the knife from Eclipse, the same one Axel had given me that first night. It was cleaned completely and wrapped in clear plastic with no note or explanation, just the knife returned to me like some kind of calling card. The message was obvious and terrifying. They knew exactly where I lived. They could get to me whenever they wanted, and they wanted me to understand that. I grabbed the knife with shaking hands and brought it inside, immediately texting Detective Calloway about it. He told me to bag it as evidence, and said he was sending a patrol car to drive by my building regularly for the next few days. That night I sat on my floor with my back against the couch and seriously considered just walking away from all of this. I could delete M's number, tell Detective Calloway I was done cooperating, pack up my stuff, and move to a different city where Monkowski couldn't find me. It would be so easy to just quit and let someone else deal with this nightmare. But then I thought about Axel's face in that park, how terrified he was but still trying to do the right thing by giving me evidence. I thought about M's desperate search for their sister and all those names in the ledger who deserved some kind of justice. I decided right there that I was going to keep going, but only through proper police channels. No more investigating on my own or taking stupid risks. The next morning I tried texting Axel to check if he was okay, but got no response. I called his number twice, and both times it went straight to voicemail. I asked Flynn if he knew anyone who worked at Eclipse, and he gave me a name of someone who bartended there sometimes. I reached out carefully and asked if they'd seen Axel around lately, trying to sound casual about it. They messaged back saying Axel had been transferred to a different venue out of state pretty suddenly, that one day he was working and the next day management said he was gone. The timing was way too convenient, and I felt sick thinking that Munkowski might have found out he talked to me. I immediately called Detective Calloway and told him what I'd learned, and he promised to try locating Axel through official channels and making sure he was actually safe. 2 days went by with no news about Axel, and I was starting to think the worst when a Facebook message popped up from someone I didn't recognize at first. It was Carly Sanford from the storage facility, and her message was short but urgent, saying she needed to talk to me about something she saw and asking if we could meet somewhere public. I agreed immediately, and we set up a time to meet at Riverside Park the next morning at 10. I showed up 15 minutes early and sat on the south bench like she asked, watching people jog past and trying not to look as nervous as I felt. Carly arrived right on time wearing jeans and a jacket, looking around carefully before sitting down next to me. She didn't waste time with small talk and just started explaining that she'd been thinking about Unit 7 ever since the police came asking questions. She admitted that Munkowski had been coming to the facility for over a year now, always late at night when Carly was working the overnight shift. Every single time Munkowski visited Unit 7 specifically, and always carried these expensive-looking document cases in and out. Carly said Munkowski would slip her a $100 bill each time and tell her to forget she saw anything, and Carly needed the money, so she took it and kept quiet. But now, with police involved and knowing what might be in that unit, Carly couldn't sleep anymore and wanted to do the right thing even if it meant losing her job. I asked her if she remembered specific dates or times, and she pulled out her phone showing me notes she'd kept, listing at least 15 different occasions with exact timestamps. I thanked her for being brave enough to come forward and immediately called Detective Calloway to tell him about this new witness. Detective Calloway brought Carly down to the precinct that same afternoon for an official statement, and I went with her for moral support. They set her up in an interview room with a recorder and had her go through everything step by step while a stenographer typed it all out. The detective showed Carly several photo arrays with different women's faces mixed in, and she pointed to Munkowski without any hesitation, saying that was definitely the woman who'd been visiting Unit 7. Carly provided the exact dates and times from her notes, and Detective Calloway cross-referenced them with the ledger entries I'd photographed, finding that they matched up perfectly. She described in detail how Munkowski would arrive in expensive cars, always alone, and would spend anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour inside the unit. Carly also mentioned seeing Munkowski carry both document cases and large envelopes, sometimes bringing stuff in and sometimes taking stuff out. When they finished taking her statement 3 hours later, Detective Calloway walked us both out and told me privately that this was exactly the kind of corroborating evidence prosecutors loved. He said Carly's testimony combined with the ledger and the physical evidence from the unit was building into a case strong enough that the district attorney's office was seriously considering filing charges. I felt this weird mix of relief and anxiety because things were finally moving forward, but that also meant Munkowski would probably figure out people were talking. A few days later, I was at the grocery store picking up basic supplies when I noticed someone following me through the aisles. At first, I thought I was being paranoid, but then Dante Garrison from Eclipse appeared next to me in the parking lot as I was loading bags into my car. He was wearing another expensive suit and had this calm smile that made my skin crawl. He said he wanted to talk to me about an opportunity and suggested we could make this whole situation go away if I was willing to be reasonable. I asked him what he meant, and he got more direct, saying that certain people were willing to offer very generous compensation if I would just forget about everything and stop cooperating with police. The bribe attempt was barely even disguised, and I felt sick listening to him talk. But I'd already pulled my phone out and started a voice recording app before he approached, holding it in my jacket pocket with the microphone facing out. I let him talk for about 2 minutes while he laid out the offer, mentioning specific dollar amounts and talking about how I could just move on with my life and never worry about money again. When he finally stopped talking, I just shook my head and walked away without saying a single word, getting in my car and locking the doors immediately. My hands were shaking as I drove home, and I sent the recording file to Detective Calloway before I even got out of my car. Flynn came home that evening and told me he was going to stay with his girlfriend for a few nights because he was worried about being at the apartment with everything getting more intense. I understood completely and told him it was smart to get some distance, but after he packed a bag and left, I felt more alone than I had in years. We split rent 50-50, so his being gone created immediate financial stress that I didn't need on top of everything else. I sat in the empty apartment that night feeling totally exhausted from the constant fear and paranoia. Every small sound made me jump, and I couldn't focus on anything for more than a few minutes. I missed having Flynn around to talk to and to help me feel like things were somewhat normal. But I knew he was making the right choice for himself, and I couldn't ask him to put himself in danger just to keep me company. I barely slept that night, and when I did, I kept having dreams about people breaking into the apartment. The next morning, Detective Calloway called and asked me to come down to the precinct to give a formal statement for the official record. I showed up at 9, and they put me in an interview room with Detective Calloway, a prosecutor from the district attorney's office, and a court reporter. They had me go through absolutely everything chronologically starting from the night at Eclipse, when Axel first gave me the evidence. The prosecutor asked incredibly detailed questions about chain of custody, wanting to know exactly how I'd handled each piece of evidence and who had touched what and when. They asked about every interaction I'd had with M and with Axel, making me describe conversations word for word as best I could remember. They also asked extensive questions about the intimidation attempts, the break-in at my apartment, the knife being returned, and the bribe attempt from Dante Garrison. The whole process took 3 full hours, and by the end, my throat was dry, and I felt completely drained. The prosecutor explained that they were building charges for witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and extortion, all specifically targeting Monkowski. She said my testimony combined with Carly's statement and the physical evidence gave them a strong foundation for prosecution. I asked how long the process would take, and she said it could be months before anything went to trial, which was not what I wanted to hear. That afternoon, M contacted me through an encrypted messaging app, sounding more excited than I'd heard them in weeks. They said they'd been spending hours cross-referencing public records databases and social media, and they'd found something major. A woman named Alicia Bedford had appeared in the system about 18 months ago, with absolutely no prior history before that date. M sent me screenshots showing that Alicia Bedford had a driver's license issued 18 months ago, a lease agreement starting 18 months ago, and employment records beginning 18 months ago, but nothing before that. The address was local, the timeline matched perfectly with when M's sister disappeared, and the physical description from the driver's license matched what M remembered. M was absolutely convinced this was their sister living under a new identity, and they wanted to go confront her immediately. I tried to calm them down and explain that we needed to go through proper channels, that just showing up at this woman's door could be dangerous or could tip off Monkowski if she was monitoring the situation. M was frustrated with me for being too cautious, but eventually agreed to let me contact Detective Calloway first. Detective Calloway took the information seriously and said he would arrange for a welfare check through appropriate channels. He explained that they had officers who specialized in trafficking cases, who knew how to approach potential victims without scaring them or putting them in danger. 2 days later, he called me back with an update. The officers had located Alicia Bedford living in a nice apartment in a decent neighborhood and working at a boutique downtown. They'd made contact with her, and she was calm and cooperative, not showing any signs of being held against her will or being in immediate danger. However, when they asked if she was M's sister, she denied it completely and refused to discuss anything about her past. The officers explained that M was looking for her, and she said firmly that she didn't want any contact with anyone from her previous life. She did agree to provide a DNA sample for comparison, but only if she could have an attorney present during the collection. Detective Calloway said they were arranging for the DNA test through official channels and that we'd have results within a week. That week felt like the longest of my entire life. M was texting me constantly asking for updates, and I had nothing new to tell them. Flynn was still staying with his girlfriend, and the apartment felt empty and depressing. I tried to focus on schoolwork, but couldn't concentrate on anything. Finally, Detective Calloway called with the DNA results. They'd come back showing a 99% certainty that Alicia Bedford was M's biological sister. But Alicia was maintaining through her attorney that she was living her life by choice, that she had no desire to reconnect with her family, and that she wanted everyone to respect her privacy and leave her alone. I had to call M and deliver the news, which was brutal because they'd been hoping for a reunion and instead got rejection. M was devastated, but also relieved to at least know their sister was alive and apparently safe. We talked for a long time about how complicated the situation was and how sometimes people make choices we don't understand, but have to respect. M said they were going to write a letter that Alicia's attorney could pass along, just letting their sister know they loved her and would be there if she ever changed her mind. A few days after that, Detective Calloway called me sounding excited about a major development. Axel had resurfaced through a secure email address, sending a message directly to Detective Calloway with a USB drive attached digitally. The drive contained security footage from Eclipse that Axel had secretly copied before he disappeared. Detective Calloway said the footage showed Monkowski directing security staff, handling envelopes of cash, and meeting with various VIP clients on specific dates. When they cross-referenced the dates on the footage with the entries in the ledger I'd photographed, everything matched up perfectly. The footage provided the visual evidence that prosecutors had been wanting to corroborate all the other testimony and documentation. Detective Calloway said this was exactly what they needed to make the case solid, and that Axel had taken a huge risk copying this footage and sending it. But the most important piece of footage was a clip from the night that Alicia disappeared from her old life. The security camera at Eclipse's back entrance had captured a clear shot of Monkowski leaving through the door with someone who matched Alicia's description from before the facial changes. The timestamp on the footage matched exactly with the timeline M had provided for when their sister went missing. You could see Monkowski with her hand on the other woman's shoulder, guiding her out through the back door and toward a waiting car. The footage supported the theory that Monkowski had facilitated Alicia's disappearance and helped her create a new identity, though you couldn't tell from the video alone whether this was a rescue from a bad situation or coercion into something worse. Detective Calloway said prosecutors were analyzing every frame of the footage, and that combined with everything else, they finally had enough evidence to move forward with formal charges against Monkowski. Detective Calloway called me 3 days later to explain what was happening with the prosecutors. They'd spent hours going through every piece of evidence we'd collected and cross-referencing everything with the security footage Axel sent. He said they were confident they could file charges for obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and extortion. I asked about murder charges since that's what M wanted most, but Detective Calloway explained carefully that they needed to prove things beyond reasonable doubt, and Alicia being alive complicated that whole angle. The prosecutors were preparing arrest warrants and setting up a timeline for execution, which apparently meant coordinating with multiple agencies and making sure everything was airtight. He warned me it would take a few more weeks, but that things were finally moving forward in a real way. I felt relieved, but also anxious, because I knew once arrests happened, there'd be no going back, and Miss Monkowski would know exactly who cooperated against her. 2 weeks after that conversation, I was walking downtown to grab lunch when I saw her at a crosswalk. Miss Monkowski stood there in a gray business suit, looking completely calm and professional, and when she turned her head, she recognized me immediately. My heart started pounding and I considered just turning around and walking the other direction, but she stepped toward me with this weird smile. She said we should talk for a minute since we had time before the light changed. I didn't want to, but I also didn't want to look scared, so I stayed put. She told me very calmly that she provided protection services for people who needed to disappear from dangerous situations. She said it like she was explaining a normal job, describing how she helped vulnerable people escape abuse and start new lives where their abusers couldn't find them. She framed the whole thing as humanitarian work, saying she'd saved dozens of people from violence and given them second chances. The way she talked about it was chilling, because she genuinely seemed to believe she was doing good in the world. She never threatened me directly, just said she hoped I understood that sometimes people needed help that the system couldn't provide. Then the light changed, and she walked away, leaving me standing there feeling sick. I texted Detective Calloway about the encounter right away, and he told me to document everything she said while it was fresh. The DNA results came back a week later, confirming that Alicia Bedford was definitely M's sister. Detective Calloway arranged for me to be there when he called M to deliver the news, and I could hear M crying on the other end when he explained that Alicia was alive and safe. But then he had to tell M the harder part, which was that Alicia had given a statement through her attorney saying she chose her new identity willingly and didn't want contact with her past life. M was devastated, asking how their sister could just abandon the family like that, but Detective Calloway gently explained that sometimes people make choices we don't understand, but have to respect. M kept saying it didn't make sense, that their sister would never choose this, but eventually, they accepted that at least Alicia was alive, even if the circumstances were complicated. It wasn't the reunion M had hoped for, but it was closure of a sort, knowing she was safe and making her own choices even if those choices hurt. After that call, the investigation shifted focus completely. Detective Calloway explained that prosecutors were refocusing on charges they could actually prove in court, which meant coercion of employees like Axel, illegal facilitation of identity changes, witness intimidation against me, and extortion of clients. The case wasn't about murder anymore because there was no murder, but it was about the criminal network Missy Monkowski had built over years. Prosecutors felt confident they could prove these charges with all the documentation, witness statements, and security footage we'd provided. The ledger entries matched up with testimony from Carly at the storage facility, and Axel's footage showed Miss Monkowski directing operations in ways that clearly crossed legal lines. I felt weird about it not being the justice M wanted, but Detective Calloway reminded me that justice isn't always dramatic or perfect. It's just about holding people accountable for what you can actually prove they did. The arrests happened on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks later. Detective Calloway called me early to let me know they were executing the warrants and that Ms. Monkowski and 2 of her associates were being taken into custody on multiple charges, including obstruction, extortion, and witness tampering. He also told me they'd located Axel safe in another state where an advocacy group had helped him relocate with a new job and protection from retaliation. Hearing that Axel was okay made me feel better about everything because he'd risked so much to get that evidence to me. The arrests made the local news that evening but didn't become a huge story, which was fine with me because I didn't want attention or people asking questions. The news just said that a local business owner had been arrested on corruption charges, nothing about the full scope of what she'd been doing. Flynn came back to the apartment 2 days after the arrests. He'd been staying with his girlfriend since everything got scary, and I didn't blame him for leaving because I'd put him in danger without meaning to. We sat down at the kitchen table and had a long talk about boundaries and safety rules going forward. He said he was still processing everything that happened and feeling hurt that I'd kept so much from him, but he agreed to stay as long as we were honest with each other from now on. We made a plan together, installing better locks on both the front door and our bedroom doors, keeping a list of emergency contacts stuck to the fridge, and promising to communicate better about anything that felt dangerous or wrong. Flynn said he understood why I got involved, but that next time I needed to tell him right away instead of trying to protect him by keeping secrets. I agreed and apologized for shutting him out when he deserved to know what was happening. Detective Calloway called me in for a final meeting the following week to officially close my involvement as a cooperating witness. He sat me down in his office and went through everything one more time, confirming that I wouldn't face any charges for accessing the storage unit since I'd immediately cooperated with police and provided crucial evidence. He thanked me for my courage and for trusting the legal process instead of trying to handle things on my own. Then he warned me that the trial would probably happen in 6 to 8 months and that I'd likely need to testify about how I received the evidence and what I observed. I felt relieved to have my part finished, but also anxious about having to testify eventually and face Ms. Monkowski in court. Detective Calloway assured me they'd prepare me thoroughly before any testimony and that witness protection measures would be in place if needed. I left his office feeling grateful that I'd chosen to work with the police rather than trying to play detective myself. I met M one final time at the same coffee shop where we'd first met in person. We sat across from each other with our drinks and talked honestly about what we'd both learned through this whole experience. M was sad that Alicia didn't want contact and kept wondering what they could have done differently to prevent their sister from ending up in Ms. Monkowski's network. I tried to explain that sometimes people make choices for reasons we can't fully understand, and that respecting Alicia's autonomy meant accepting her decision even when it hurt. M said they were going to write a letter that Alicia's attorney could pass along, just letting their sister know they loved her and would be there if she ever changed her mind. We agreed that sometimes closure means accepting partial answers instead of getting the perfect resolution you hoped for. M thanked me for everything I'd done to help find their sister, even though the outcome wasn't what either of us expected. We exchanged phone numbers and promised to update each other if anything changed with the case or if Alicia ever reached out. Then we finished our coffee and said goodbye, both of us feeling that bittersweet sense of resolution, where you're grateful something ended but sad about how it turned out. That's how it happened from my point of view, but you already know I want to hear yours. What would you have done differently? Leave a comment below, because the best part of this channel is the back and forth we get going.